Hey everybody, Mr. Lasitis again. Make sure this one is a little bit different than area model, so it's not the same exact one, but it is about writing equivalent fractions. This time we're going to look at using number lines instead of area models. So it's a little bit different, and it's good to be able to use both. The more strategies we know in math, the better, the more we grow our brains for sure. So these few slides you will notice look quite similar about naming fractions, equivalent fractions, but then it gets into the differences between last time was about area models, this time's about number lines. So be sure you read through this to get a refresher on using number lines for equivalent fractions. Let's go through one example here. And the most important thing when we're doing these, I think, is that we want to make sure we're being as neat as possible, which if you're like me, is kind of hard sometimes. But it is important with number lines because we can really skew our results, make them look different than they should if we're not being extra neat. So we're going to prove here that 1/4 is equivalent to 2/8, which means my number line, the first one, for 1/4, I know my denominator is going to be 4. So I'm going to start at 0/4 and I'm going to end at 4/4 because that's a whole. In between, I'm going to have 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3. So I need to make sure that these are pretty evenly spaced. Let's try one there and one there and one here. And those look pretty good, right? They're pretty evenly spaced. I don't want to make them off too far, otherwise it would be very challenging for me to compare. And there's only 3 marks you'll notice, which is sometimes the tricky part. But if we count through these, we will see that this is correct because it goes 0, 1 out of 4, then 2 out of 4, and then 3 out of 4, and then I finish my line with a whole number 4 out of 4. So it is only 3 marks in between. But really, as we've seen before, it's these spaces that we're sort of counting, right? That's 1/4 of the number line. This is 2/4 of the number line. And another 1/4 makes it 3/4, and then the last 1/4 makes it 4/4, or one whole if we were to shade all those in. Okay, let's look back. Let's look down here, change colors, and we're going to do 2/8. Well, let's go ahead and make my fraction here an 8. This is a good strategy to follow is by making sure you got your beginning and end the same. 0 out of 8 and 8 out of 8. Now I need to split this up into 8 pieces. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit harder. So let's try one here. And you really sometimes just have to sort of eyeball it and see how close you get. And if you mess up, you can always erase and come back, especially on the Nearpod. But that looks pretty good, right? That's 8 spaces. I can count them, or I can count the tick marks to make sure that I did it right. This should go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So if I have something other than that, I'll need to renumber my number line or redo it. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And all these are over 8 because that's the fractional number line I'm showing. This is chunks of 8. So 2/8, 3/8. And you could fill in all the rest of these down the line. Well, what I'm trying to show in this particular model is the equivalency between 1/4, which is right here on this blue number line, and on the purple number line, 2/8. And they look right on. So one thing that this helps us with, we know these two are equivalent. If they don't look equivalent on your number line, then one or the other, maybe you made a mistake, you didn't put enough lines in, or maybe you skewed them, because those two should be right on top of each other or pretty close, right? If it's like these are pretty close to being right on top, if they were skewed one way or the other a little bit, that's what makes the number lines tricky. Is we can fool ourselves if we, for example, let me show you a quick example here. So this has probably happened, right? We've gone through the 1/4, or the fourths look pretty good up here. They're pretty even. Then when I got to the eighths, I made this mark pretty close to where I made it with the 1/4 mark. And then as I got closer to the end, I was like, oh man, I'm running out of room here. I got to just make a bunch of marks. Well, that's going to skew it, right? Because this 2/8, we can see the space in between these two and the space in between this one, especially, and this one is not accurate, right? We need those to be evenly spaced, otherwise our number lines are going to show us the wrong results.